So I'll call the meeting of the First Nations Relations Committee of the Strathcona Regional District to order for Wednesday, October 20th, 21. And should I take a stab at acknowledging that we're on the traditional territory of the Lakota people?
At your pleasure, Mr. Chairman.
Well, that's what I'll do, or did.
Yeah, you think you just did it.
Anyway, adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you. Any discussion? Adds, changes? Seeing none. Oh, I gotta do the, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none. Motion passes. And I lost my screen here. My screen just disappeared for a second.
It's that rectangular thing in front of you, Charlie.
No, no, I had everything organized and it disappeared, that's all.
Don't have the big screen in the boardroom?
Hmm?
Yeah.
Don't have a big screen?
Oh, I've got my laptop, but that's okay. So we've adopted the agenda, petitions and delegations. There are none. Adoption of the previous meeting minutes, please.
So moved.
Thank you. Seconder.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion, business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed? Motion passes. Chair's report, I have nothing to report on this one other than, well, I guess I don't have nothing. I did attend the first Truth and Reconciliation day down at Spirit Square in Campbell River. It was very meaningful, well worth attending. Talked with lots and lots of people. Very proud of our community. When we went for the walk, it was when I turned around to look at everyone coming down the street, it was like a river of orange, and was very well attended and very much appreciated by everyone. So it was good. So that's it on my chair's report. Do we need a motion to receive the verbal?
If you wish.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second. Davis.
Thank you. Any on receipt? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Staff reports. Number 1A for First Nations territorial acknowledgements.
Move receipt of the report from the CAO.
Second.
Thank you. And now we'll get into the meat and discussion of it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Tina will speak to this for us.
Thank you, CEO, to the chair, to the committee. Good morning, everyone. The discussion is on the First Nations territorial acknowledgement policy that the SRD will include an acknowledgement of traditional territory at the beginning of public meetings or events being hosted or co-hosted by the SRD. There is additional materials that are there to support and use as a resource by elected officials and staff when delivering a territorial acknowledgement. Any questions or supports, as First Nations coordinator, we're happy to provide the supports. The materials provided is based on the presentation that was made to the committee before and intended to be made to the board at another time. And so I'm asking for the territorial acknowledgement policy for consideration to the board, or if there's any changes, or whether you choose to support it. And I was wondering if you have any questions for me.
Okay, so questions of Tina?
Yep, got my hand up.
Okay. Uh, Director Abram.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tina, for the report. Very thorough. Like your color listing. That's wonderful. Be able to switch from line to line and know where you are.
Yeah.
I do have a question. When we get down to the sort of bluish color, electoral area C, Quadra Island, I've got two peoples to be acknowledged. The one, if you look, there's the Quadra Island one, and then there's the Discovery Islands one.
Mhm.
In the Quadra Island one, it looks like I am acknowledging the Lekwitaq territories because of the Wewakai Wewakam,
Correct.
which is fine. That's who I deal with all the time. But there are others within that area, and you go into that in the next one when you get into Discovery Islands, where there's shared overlapping territory among First Nations. Well, there's also overlapping territory on Quadra Island. As far as what the First Nations that I understand have asked or have mapped, and I'll use Homalco as an example and possibly Comox as an example, where they have also said, that they have shared territory, or whether it's shared or exclusive or whatever. I'm not going to get into the details, but I'm just saying that those other people are not acknowledged in the Quadra Island acknowledgement by the director, whereas they are acknowledged in the Discovery Islands in the reverse. The Lekwitaq people are not recognized in the Discovery Islands one, but yet I know that the Wewakai anyway, actually the Wewakam also, when you get up into Lockborough Inlet, there's overlaps, and those overlaps have, way back in the treaty process, there was supposed to be a process where overlaps would be resolved prior to going to the treaty table. Then that was removed, and it was, we'll do the treaty, and then you guys work it out yourselves, which is fine. That's the way it is. But I'm just wondering, it seems like, okay, if I'm at an Area C meeting and I'm recognizing Lekwitaq peoples being Wewakai Wewakam, am I going to be offending Homalco, Comox? I don't know about Clahoos, Clahoos may have something, Sleaman may have something up towards Toba. So how do I get around that dilemma?
Great points, great questions. And for territories, there's core territories, shared territories, and overlapping territories. For the Discovery Islands, you would be recognizing the Coast Salish and Kwakwaka'wakw. The Wewakai Wewakam are under Kwakwaka'wakw, so they would be recognized by saying Kwakwaka'wakw. And according to the Discovery Islands, there's no core territory for anyone. It is more shared, overlapping. For Quadra Island, that is a core territory for the Lekwitaq people. I definitely, Comox has a lot of proof, a lot of reports on us having a lot of presence there in the past. But we are there we do have interest there, but that's not our core territory. For example, Comox Valley, that's you would say as a welcome or an acknowledgement, Comox First, you're on the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. But Weewaikai, Weewaikum, they do have overlapping territory in the Comox as well. But as a territorial acknowledgement, if you're standing in Comox, you recognize Comox First Nation. Quadra Island is a Lakota people territory. It is a core territory, so they would be the ones that would be recognized, even though there is other interest, but it is understood by the First Nation that it's like your backyard. No one has it's your backyard. But for the Discovery Islands, that is not a core territory of someone's. It is a shared overlapping interest in all of those. I'm not sure
Okay,
if I explained that correct, so you can understand.
Yeah. that's very, very good explanation. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and sorry, and
It's
then
still a bit of, go ahead.
and under
Go
the
ahead.
words, the Kwakwaka'wakw is an umbrella. So there's Kwakwaka'wakw and there is all the First Nations from Comox up island are Kwakwaka'wakw. So they're sharing, so all the First Nations would fall under Kwakwaka'wakw. Instead of listing them all, you would say Kwakwa. Same as Coast Salish, that's a higher umbrella. And then that's what Homolko and Klahoose would fall under. Many, numerous, over 100 First Nations would fall under Coast Salish. So instead of listing them all, you would just use the umbrella terms Coast Salish or Kwakwaka'wakw.
Okay, so just to be clear, if I could, Charlie, thank you. If it's an electoral area C Quadra Island issue on Weewaikai territory, when I stand up at the podium, do I say, recognize we're on the unceded traditional territory of the Weewaikai peoples or Weewaikai First Nation, or do I say the Kwakwaka'wakw? Sorry, so if you say
It's
that for me, please.
It's Kwakwaka'wakw, and the Weewaikai, Weewaikum share, and they're the Lakwatak peoples.
Okay, but do I need, what I'm saying is say all three things, the Kwakwaka'wakw, the Lakwatak, and the Weewaikai. Do they all need to be acknowledged, or is there one acknowledgement that covers everybody?
If it all depends where you're physically standing. If you're physically standing on Quadra Island at the podium, you would say Lakwatak people, and they would be completely happy with that.
Okay, so
Okay.
anywhere on Quadra Island.
Correct.
Yes.
I'm just trying to get this clear, Charlie, because I don't want to offend anybody. And, by saying anybody to be offended by
Exactly.
being left out. So,
And I have sent these to the First Nation themselves, and waiting for a formal response. Informally, yes, I have been there and I have to the chief and councils and have said we're in the unceded traditional territory of the Lakwatak peoples, and they're fine. But I am waiting for a formal in writing. That's why a formal in writing saying yes from chief and council, but I have recently sat with chief and council and said that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Lakwatak people.
okay,
Right.
and on the second one,
Hey,
the
Jim?
Discovery Islands. Yes,
I've got 3 or 4 other people wanting to speak too.
okay, well, can you put me on the bottom of the list then, please?
Yep, no problem. Just if we each ask a couple of questions or no more than 2, and then give Tina a chance to respond, then we'll go through it and then we'll come back to repeat, because I know some of the questions sort of generate additional questions. So my next one up was Kevin.
fine.
Jules. Kevin?
Oh, hi there. I
Good
just had a
morning.
question about just kind of acknowledgement for Cayucit checklist it. I was just wondering if the Monmouth Treaty would be put in there.
Yep, it's in draft form, so it would be sent for approval, and
Mm.
anything that should be added or taken out
hmm
would, this would be draft and waiting for formal approval.
Awesome. Yeah, that was my only question. Thank you. And this is awesome, by the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next speaker up is Director Davis. Martin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question to Tina is, well, first of all, in Tassus, we used to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of Mochilot First Nations. And when I was elected, I just contracted that to we're on the territory of the Mochilot First Nations. Is that a problem? I mean, I could potentially see it being a problem with some of my constituents, but nobody has ever objected to that. So is that appropriate?
I, again, waiting for formal approval. It is appropriate because Tassus is Mount Chutmuchalat territory, yes. Or the umbrella, overarching umbrella is New Channel. So you can say New Channel, and that encompasses everyone underneath them. But if you want to be direct, Chutmuchalat, yes.
Okay, I'm just saying specifically, I say that we're speaking from Mochilot territory.
Yep. You can
Okay.
say Mount Chutmuchalat or New Channels, either or, perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Director Colburn?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Typo is all really, this is fantastic. This is beautiful. We've been doing it for quite some time here. Chinnikent is CHINEHKINT. So it's Chinnikent. Just for, and I'm just wondering if you have had outreach with them. I got mine formally from the former chief from Roseanne Billy, and we had lots of consultation back and forth with that. So I just wanted to highlight that just as a tale.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your hard work on this.
Thank you so much. Yes, they've been reached out, and yes, I've been told that this has been going on and that you guys are already have this established. And thank you for the typo.
Okay, anything further, Director?
Thank you, that's all.
Okay, and we'll go back to Director Abram.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Tina, back to Electoral Area C, Discovery Islands this time. So if I'm in any of those places, I would recognize both Coast Salish and Kwakwaka'wakw. Sorry, I'm just never going to get that one.
Yeah.
Kwakiwak.
Kwakwaka'wakw. If you're
Okay.
standing anywhere on any of those islands and you acknowledge you're on the territories of the Coast Salish and Kwakwaka'wakw. Good.
I'm good.
Yes, correct.
Okay. That was all my question was, Charlie. Thank you.
Okay, no problem, Jim. Anything further? Director Kerr.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Tina, for a well-written report. I noticed that you're recommending just the acknowledgement at the beginning of the meeting. I know that I've been at many meetings where everybody that comes on does an acknowledgement, and it feels like it's overdone. And so you're recommending that the tradition be that it's done once at the beginning of the meeting and not continually through the meeting.
That's up to you. That's totally personal. Yes, they can get very long. I know I've been to some conferences and workshops where the whole beginning, practically to the first coffee break, it is acknowledgements. So it's also at least once at the beginning to pay respects. Or when it comes to your turn, you can say, I too recognize. Or unless you're virtual and then you say where you're actually physically sitting at. Because wherever you're physically sitting at, that's the acknowledgement you would use.
So if I can, Director Kerr, just to ask a question here. So if, say, Director Kerr is, or Director Davis, who's out in Tassus, is participating, when acknowledging him speaking, he would then, the very first time he speaks, acknowledge the territory that he's on of Mushulat Mauchat?
Correct.
Okay, and then, but only just the once, sort of like the introduction for the first at the start of the meeting?
Yeah, if you're all, yep, wherever you're at. And then if you want, somebody already says it before you, there's nothing wrong with saying I too. If there's two of us sitting in the same area, you can both say, like the first one recognizes it and then the second person can say I too recognize. But it's
Okay.
already been said, so.
Alrighty. Director Kerr, did you have anything more?
I just, to me, it does seem overdone, and I think, you know, I mean, this is one acknowledgement. I can quite conceive of other acknowledgements in the future. I mean, one thing we've done is limited acknowledgements to the crown and to the country, and a lot of acknowledgements we've eliminated from our processes over the years in, I think, the purpose of inclusion. And but I can certainly foresee other acknowledgements coming forward other than land acknowledgements. I mean, we could get bogged down in a whole nothing but acknowledgements. So to me, it's starting to get that way at some of the meetings. I understand the signal we're sending, but also, I would like to send out the concern that the meeting can certainly get bogged down in nothing but acknowledgements.
Okay, who's next up?
This could just be leftovers.
Okay, Kevin, Jules, you still have your hand up. Did you wish to offer any comments?
Okay, sure. Maybe something with the Kwakiwak. Maybe like if we could get some kind of pronunciation in there just to help.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be great, because I know saying it properly would be great.
It sounds great. We can have phonetics and added to them.
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much.
Did we not have phonetics on the table?
That one was missing.
Oh, okay. Anything further? Director Colburn, I see your hand's still up. So when you finish speaking, please take your hand down, and unless you want to say more.
I just had one further question. When this isn't really, you know, for myself or anything, but for people who are representing the Strathcona Regional District. I know that the Comox First Nation is in here, and forgive me for not knowing this, and I've tried to look it up, but are they part of the Kwakwaka'wakw umbrella or the Coast Salish umbrella? That's my first question.
First of all, that's a great question, by the way. And actually, Comox First Nation is unique because they sit on what would be called the border. They are both Kwakwaka'wakw and Coast Salish. And so they are unique in that way. It just so happens where they're sitting is the border where they are both. And that's,
So that leads me,
sorry, go ahead.
go ahead, sorry.
No, you go ahead, sorry.
So for someone who was, you know, in a position where they were representing the Strathcona Regional District, you know, would it be appropriate to say that, you know, the Strathcona Regional District it sits on the unceded First Nations land of the Kwakwaka'wakw, of the Nuu-chah-nulth, and of the Coast Salish territories? And would that broad umbrella kind of cover our entire area?
Except for the word unseated, because
Okay.
because Cayuga-Chuklusat is treaty. So you would just say on the traditional territories of the Nuu-chah-nulth, Coast Salish, and Kwakwaka'wakw, then it's perfect. Unceded means not treaty, so.
Fantastic. So thank you for that, because I think that's also important when, you know, say the CAO or the chair or something is speaking on behalf of, and, you know, having the understanding that the territories that are included within our large geographic area are of those three, you know, territories. I just was curious about that. So thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, anything further, Director?
No, thank you.
Okay, and Martin, Director Davis?
You're muted, Martin.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Yeah, great job, by the way, Tina. I really appreciate this, and I imagine it will be a bit of an evolving document. I have just one clarification, and maybe Kevin would want to answer this. I'm not sure, but I've heard people of a Hattesack called a Hattis, and I'm just wondering if that's an appropriate term for the people, and is a Hattesack a place?
It's my understanding Hattesack is they're a nation. Is my understanding.
Right.
Yeah, yes. A Hattis is just kind of like short, I guess, for a Hattis. That's how I've always seen it, but I'm not too sure. A Hattis is, yeah.
Okay. I just want to be clear because I've heard it used, and I just want to know that it's okay to use that when you're talking about the people of a Hattesack. Does that make sense, or is it inappropriate?
It does make sense, but I think I'd be more comfortable with someone from a Hattis answering that.
Correct.
Okay.
Completely agree.
Fair enough. Thanks.
If you, I can find the answer out for that if you like.
Yeah, no, I'd appreciate it because I've heard it used, and I have used it myself, but I just want to make sure that I'm not using it inappropriately. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further, Director Colburn? See your hands up.
Just from conversations that I've had, Hattis is is the place. The Hattissat are the people. This is just to my knowledge, which absolutely is not, you know, gold star word or anything like that. But Hattis is the place, and Hatissat are the people. So that's how I've had it explained to me. Of course, further clarification, because I.
Thanks.
Okay. Anything further, Director? Okay. If there's no further speakers, I have a couple of questions. I did notice, and Martin didn't, Director Davis didn't bring it up, but Tassus is not listed on your chart.
The
That's City of
Tassus
Thames.
falls under Mawachat Muchlat.
I know, but for respect for the difference between electoral areas and communities, it would be more appropriate to have Tassus listed as their own area, because this is the
Okay.
direction to the board,
Okay,
in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Okay, I also didn't see Hamalko First Nation on the list anywhere.
Malco territory, their traditional territory is out Toba Inlet, Butte Inlet, out in that area.
Yeah, is Stewart Island and Sonora Island in?
That would be under Coast Salish. They're
Okay,
Coast
but that's,
Salish.
yeah, but their home lands are on Stewart Island and Sonora as well.
Yep,
That hole
that
in the
could,
wall is their traditional areas, which I believe puts it in ours. And just maybe we can get that clarified.
I can definitely get that territory.
Okay, and they're definitely present in our community. They have reserve lands up off Jubilee Parkway.
Correct, they do. They are, this isn't their traditional territory though. This is the Lakwatak people's territory. They do have a reserve in the
Yep.
Lakwatak people's territory.
Mm-hmm.
So unless you're actually standing on their reserve, you would recognize not their land, but their village.
Yeah. Okay. No, I
Because
think,
the land is actually Lakwatak.
yeah, I know it's a sensitive issue
Mhm.
between Kwakwaka'wakw and Hamalko. I think if it was, it wouldn't happen today like it happened 25 years or so ago.
Yeah, it's it can definitely be sensitive. It's definitely sensitive.
Yes, and somewhere we should have sensitivities in our policy document too, or at least make our board aware. I noticed difference between the policy document and the chart. And the policy document, under the definitions, and it talks about on page 2 of 2 at the top there, it says the form of territory acknowledgement generally be as follows. On behalf of the Strathcona Regional District, I would like to acknowledge that we're meeting today on the traditional territory of the blank First Nation. And when I went down this, it doesn't talk about unseated. And yet in the chart, it makes reference to unseated or treaty.
Correct. And the policy itself is a suggestion that would cover scenarios, whether you're seated or unseated. Now, if you would like to, so that statement in the policy would be acceptable and in a broader sense, where the table and the resources provided helps you go a step further if you wish and can add more to it or define it a little better or whatever your preference is. But by just stating what's in the policy is fine. But if you would like to step out of just add more to it, you can move into what the resources are, the resource material, and start cultivating it.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm just to make sure, I wasn't complaining. I just think that if we're going to, maybe in the definitions, there should be a definition of seated versus unseated. Your previous one that you used in previous discussions today was unseated means non-treaty, treaty is treaty, and unseated means not in treaty.
Correct.
So maybe even just a simple little statement in the definitions would help the board understand the difference. And Mr. Yates would like to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, when I was reviewing this with Tina, it was more to set a minimum, if you will. In other words, an expectation as to when formal territorial acknowledgements would be given for regional district hosted or co-hosted events. Not necessarily the specific content, but a style and when that opportunity should be used as a minimum for directors representing the regional district in public. That was the essence of the policy. The background material and the resources Tina have provided are essentially to fill in all of those specific gaps for specific situations and circumstances. So that would help to explain the difference between the policy, which is not necessarily an exact recitation for every circumstance, but really more of an expectation as to what the regional district will do in terms of acknowledgement prior to hosting or co-hosting public events. So that is essentially the difference.
Okay. And the last question, Tina, is the enhanced, how do I say, an extended version of a land acknowledgement and sharing about your own ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
So, gosh, I started to go through what mine were. It gets quite long, and when would it be appropriate to use an extended version?
I think that's on your level of comfort. I believe when you're invited to a First Nation, and you're up at the podium starting to speak, I think doing an extended version would be appropriate there, to be able to present who you are and what your background is as a sign of respect. When you share your background and do the extended version, you're showing your ancestors to them, and that's a sign of respect. And by acknowledging their territory, you're acknowledging them and their ancestors.
Okay. Would it be fair to compare that if we were invited to be a speaker at a conference or whatever, and you go up to the podium, but usually the chair will introduce you and give your background.
Mm-hmm.
So would this be similar to that, except you're introducing yourself? So if you had been invited to speak in a big house ceremony, to give your background information there, sort of as that extended version?
Correct. That would
Okay.
be appropriate, yes.
All righty. And I think that's um, how can I have one, it's more of a personal comfort thing. And it has to do with using the term seated, but if we use seated to mean treaty or non-treaty, I don't have a problem with that. But I'm not sure that seated, unseated is confined to that.
Okay,
It's difficult to talk about it, so I guess I'm just gonna shoot from the hip and hope for the best, and it's to try and get some knowledge and clarity around what seated means. Like I look at it, and sorry, no disrespect to anybody, but I can't rewrite history. Like I can't change the past. I can only work towards making a better future. And so I've been struggling with this seated versus unseated. I guess I'm asking for your help
I get
to understand better.
from my level of knowledge is unceded is unsurrendered. You're on an unsurrendered lands or unsurrendered territory. Unsurrendered is a First Nation land that their ancestors traditionally occupied and used, that has not been legally surrendered. And my is ceded is because in treaty there's a legal definition now.
Okay.
That's my level of knowledge.
Okay. Thank you. Anyway, seeing no, oh, Director Abram.
Yes, I waited through your 6 questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And
I waited
in
until
your-
all of you were finished first, Jim.
until, like in your last point, I too struggle with the exact same point, seated versus unseated. I think our policy statement that we are on the territories of blah, 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 whatever the nation's name may be, I think that is something that would be universally acceptable in all of our areas, whereas in some areas, using seated versus unseated may not be quite as acceptable to the general public I'm talking about. And it also, it basically defines whether or not, there is treaty or isn't treaty. But we have numerous persons that are in treaty. They are in the process of treaty negotiations. And if they are in the process, then, we don't know if it's seated or unseated at the particular time. So I think if we stuck with our policy statement that Tina has written so eloquently, and just said that we're speaking from a territory of, and that really covers it. And it doesn't attribute anything to anybody. It just says, we know where we are. We're on your territory, and thank you very much. And now we're going to have our meeting. So personally, I think that's a very good compromise, and takes away that possible, I guess, objection or whatever. I don't know if that's the right word, but uncomfortableness by some of the public with saying something is seated or not seated. So anyway, I would prefer to just have the statement say that we're on the territory of. That's very clear, and it's very accurate. It is their traditional territory.
Sorry, my mic was off. Director Colburn, followed by Director Jules.
Thanks for all the conversation back and forth. And I think that though this, can be uncomfortable and it can be, confusing. I know speaking from here, the difference between seated and unseated, I think is part of the reconciliation process. I think that's acknowledging the truth that these lands were never given up, that we are on someone else's. So, I don't know what Director, Jules has, maybe, some insight to that, but, people will say to you that, we are a treaty nation now, and I would much rather acknowledge that most of the lands in BC, the biggest part of the lands in BC are unceded, that they have never been given up by that nation, that they've never been negotiated, that they were actually stolen lands. So I'm perfectly comfortable with that, saying that here, that is the truth, and that's and that being uncomfortable is part of that reconciliation program process to say, the truth about the history that's happened in Canada. So I really appreciate the conversation that's gone on here. I really do. I think that it's important. And I think that the reason for doing acknowledgements, one of the reasons anyways, is to say that we admit that, this is what happened in the past. So I just really appreciate the conversation, and I know where I sit here today, Zabalis is on unceded land. So yeah, just thank you for the insights and the comments and the questions. It's been really, I really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you. I'm always happy to learn.
Okay. Thank you. Now, Director Jules.
Thank you. Julie said basically what I was going to say as well, is that it is a way of acknowledging where you are. And sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought for a second. That was very good, Julie. Thank you for saying that. I mean, showing respect to where you are, and where you are speaking from is a big part. I wanted to ask a question, if there was any kind of like protocols for making mistakes throughout this, if there was any kind of protocols that the people around the table should know about, in case that gets called upon at any time. It's better to know what type of protocols you'd be dealing with when you make a mistake, or if that's basically it. I was just curious about that, and if that would be um able to be put in here in some kind of way.
Okay, Tina.
That's a great point, Director Jones. For protocols for mistakes. I know that the conversations I've been a part of, I know the effort of trying is definitely, and making an effort is appreciated at that forefront, but I'm definitely asking each of them about that and what their comments are on that. Is a great idea. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further? Okay, I don't see anyone. Only one last question from me. Tina, is Nootka Island, which is New Chatlet's First Nation, for the most part, at least down to Calvin Creek in the north part in the water, but I didn't see New Chatlet's anywhere in here.
Now, but they would be under the umbrella of Coast Salish, or sorry, New Channels. But again, draft and looking for confirmation.
Yeah, I think they consider themselves as a small but separate First Nation traditional or hereditary chief system.
Yes.
And yeah, I did a lot of close work with them on their traditional territory and those and economic development, stuff like that. But I think part of it is looking at it from, if I was to look at our policy document and the guidance to our directors with an outside lens. And if I was First Nations, that's one of the things I would do, would be to look to see where my First Nation was.
Definitely.
If I may
Okay.
speak, Charlie, I just wanted to thank you for recognizing that, because that one actually went by me as well. So thank you for recognizing that.
You're welcome. Okay, I don't see anyone else's hands up. So we're on receipt of the CAO's report. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing none, move to item B, that the committee recommend adoption of the draft acknowledgement policy.
So moved.
Thank you, Director Davis, seconded by
I'll
Director
second.
Colburn.
Director Colburn. Discussion? Mr. Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, just for clarification, the policy is the two-page document that precedes all of the background resource material. The resource material will change over time, as Tina has referenced in the report. It's an evolving thing. The policy is setting out the expectation of directors when hosting events on behalf of the regional district. So we're really talking about the 2 pages that constitute the policy itself with this resolution. Thank you.
Okay. Director Colburn. Your hand was
So
up.
I'm just curious. Oh, thank you. So I'm just curious if then the intent from the conversation I heard was to do a definition of a ceded versus unceded, territory land. Would that be included, or are we accepting? So would that be an amendment to this, or just wondering because I had heard it in the discussion?
Mr. Yates.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it certainly can be, if that's the committee's wish to recommend to the board that we include a definition of ceded versus unceded. I'm not sure it's actually referenced anywhere else in the policy itself, but it certainly is in the background material. So that would call it late for the committee if it wishes to make that recommendation to the board.
If you wish to,
And further to that, that's what.
sorry, you
Sorry,
broke up a little.
that's why. Yeah, that's why I was asking, because in the policy, it doesn't use any of that terminology. So I was just wondering where that definition would be, if that would be in the addendum or in the supplemental items. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think I was just reading that the purpose of the policy was to establish guidelines for use of First Nations. So I looked as the guidelines as being part of the policy, overarching policy, but guidelines should be part of it according to the purpose. So And I would think that your mention of the definition of seated and unseated, also a protocol when you make mistakes, making sure that all the nations are covered. To me, that should all be part and parcel with what we recommend to the board. But I will leave it up to the board if they want to see. Oh, Mr. Leach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've got a fair bit of notes myself from the comments going around here. Would the committee prefer that we bring back an updated draft to this committee in a more polished form based on the comments there before we bring it to the board?
I would think that that would be a good idea, but just looking to see if any of the other directors have comments. I think that that would be good. Is there a sense of urgency in terms of timelines to get this done? I know that it's been referred out to First Nations and Tina's waiting for responses. So I'm assuming that that wouldn't create an unnecessary delay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think because she's waiting for responses as well, and the fact that we've got a fair bit of feedback here, I think just direction to staff that we make the amendments as discussed here today, incorporate the feedback that Tina's going to get from the First Nations and bring it back to the committee.
Okay, and then thank you very much. I have Director Moglove followed by Director Abram.
Yeah, thanks. I do think it's a good idea to tighten this up a bit. One of the things I'd like to see in the next version is in the policy itself at the moment, it talks about the territorial acknowledgement, just saying I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of, but on the chart, when it talks about the territorial, it specifically uses the word unceded traditional territory. And I think that's an important distinction, and I think we should clarify that as to which are we going to be using that word unceded. I personally think we should, but I think that needs to be part, if we're going to, that has to be part in the policy, I believe. So yeah, I think it's a good idea to send it back and do some revisions and some of the comments that were made by various directors. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Director Abram.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't really feel that this needs to come back to us. These are some fairly minor things that we have all agreed upon that Tina can certainly handle on her own and bring forward to the board. And if we don't like it at the board, we can certainly refer it back to the committee. I think we're just adding an extra step here that we don't really need. And the whole issue around seated or unseated, the policy says, the territories, blah, blah, blah. But we know that we have I believe there's language in there that says we can add to that. So if we know we're on unceded territory, then we say it. If we don't know, because there is a treaty going on and we don't know what's going to happen, then we don't say it. We just say it's on the territory of. But I think Tina is totally capable of putting together what somebody called a tighter version of this and bringing it directly to the board. And let's just get on with it. I don't think that we need to, put it off for another 2 months or whatever by the time it gets to the board. So anyway, that would be my comment.
Okay. See, no other speakers. Did you have any comments in closing, CAO? Dave?
Oh, sorry, I was
Muted
muted there.
Dave.
Yeah, no, thanks. Well, as Tina's reiterated a few times that there's nothing prohibiting us from making acknowledgements, this afternoon, tomorrow, while we work on this policy. I think this policy helps guide. I mean, it's a tool, it's a template that I'll reference, and I think it's going to be useful to everybody. I personally think I've got a fair bit of notes here and some comments. Excuse me. I think it is worthwhile coming back, making some changes, revisions to it, but it won't delay the fact that, you know, this afternoon the chair can make a territorial acknowledgement. It's not delaying that process.
Okay, good, thank you. So what do we have for the motion? Is it as written under B?
Yes.
Okay, anybody wish to amend, change, or? Don't see anybody's hands up. Therefore, on the motion, is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. On to number 2, cultural awareness training for elected officials.
Oversee Director Culver.
Thank you. Second.
Second, Davis.
Thank you. Okay. We have, if you're not wanting to speak, can you please put your hands down? Because we're having to bounce back and forth between computers and agendas, so. And, no, I'm not getting Wi-Fi either.
Kevin, Director Jules, and Abram.
Okay, Director Jules?
Yes?
Yeah, did you had your hand up?
No, I don't. It doesn't say my hands up on my computer.
Okay, no, it's down now. Director Abram?
Abram,
Yep. Your hand's up, Jim. Did you want to speak?
just wanted to make sure that you knew it was not left over, it was new.
Okay,
Okay, so we're talking on receipt at this time. So on receipt of the report, there's a few things in there that I just wanted to mention. There's a suggestion of a number of days of cultural training, which is fine. I totally agree that that should happen. But I would like to, like, some of them are like 2.5 days long. I would like to suggest that, you know, as I don't know whether it needs to be a policy or it just needs to be this committee says or whatever, but I would like to see our sessions not be any longer than a few hours. 3 hours is a long time to sit and absorb the amount of information that we're going to be asked to absorb, first of all. It's also a long time to sit without a break. So I'm hoping that, you know, you can break this timeline that's set before us into 3-hour chunks. And I'm also wondering is we're going to a great deal of effort to have cultural training for non-First Nations about First Nations. Are we going to take the sort of appropriate steps to also have training for First Nations about non-First Nations culture? Because, you know, I don't know what the understanding is on the First Nation side of the equation. It may be, you know, totally clear, it may not be. And also, you know, in this training, will we talk about agreement from First Nations and local governments to have some reciprocity about how we do business? because that's going to be a big part. I mean, that's what we are. We are a service organization. We provide services. So I think everybody needs to be clear that, you know, we're going to have First Nations participating. We're going to be participating. So we should all be playing by the same rules. So can that be worked into this cultural training from a local government side in addition to a First Nation side? Because we may both have completely different understandings of what this will be. So I'd like to see that worked into this this report. Three points.
Mr. Chair, so, you know, anything's possible. However, we're trying to address some cultural awareness training, staff, all of the local, the munis, the other regional districts that participate in, that we're bringing to the elected officials. Happy to do anything else if there's emotion on it, but I think we should be dealing with this cultural awareness training separately, and happy to entertain an additional motion if Director Abram has one and is supported.
Okay, thank you, CAO. I've got Directors Moglove and then Colburn.
Thanks. As I see it, the purpose of this cultural training and awareness is to further the process of reconciliation. The principles of reconciliation, one of which is action to address destructive impacts on Aboriginal education, language, culture, health, and child welfare. It's a process of healing relationships that require public truth sharing, apology, commemoration, and redress of past harms. I would say that the past harms have been perpetuated, or I'm not sure if that's the correct word, by the settlers on Indigenous peoples. Therefore, the cultural awareness that we need to do is to further reconciliation and try to get a grasp and to try to redress those past harms. The past harms were not perpetuated on us. It was perpetuated on them. And I hate using us and them, but at this point, I think we have to. That is the whole point of reconciliation. So I think it's vital, and I really appreciate this report, that the cultural awareness and training that would go forward on the basis that has been outlined. Thank you.
Director Colburn, followed by Director Jules.
I think that Director Moglove said that in a much more succinct and positive way than I was going to comment. So thank you for that. Oh, I think, yeah, we are taking this to further reconciliation, and thank you for speaking so eloquently, because I don't believe that we need to be I'm just going to leave it there. Thank you. No further comment.
Okay, sorry, we're having troubles with my computer system up here. So Director Jules is up now.
Alrighty, thank you. Yeah, I wasn't too sure what James was talking about with having them talking about our side or your side. I'm not too sure, but I mean, on speaking on the days, like, I think taking as much time to learn as much as we can would be greatly appreciated. And I have no problem with the 2.5 days of training as to soak in as much as we can. That's the main point in this, is to try to gain as much knowledge as we can. And yeah, and this is about reconciliation. So thank you, Claire, for speaking to that so nicely. Thank you.
Okay, and Director Davis?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd have to concur with Kevin and Claire's comments and Julie's as well. I don't see, all I see is a need for orientation regarding Strathcona Regional Districts and how it operates, and I think that is already happening. As far as any other cultural issues regarding the larger culture in Canada, I think First Nations are painfully aware of that. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Yates. So
Possibly Director Mogul.
Director Moglove?
No, I put my hand down.
Okay. Yeah, just went down. Thanks. My only comments on this, because I don't see any other speakers, is I don't see it meaning a full day of training. I think is probably what it's going to take, at least. But I don't see that as sitting down for a full day. It's the same thing as a 1.5 hour virtual workshop can, an hour and a half is pushing the limits there, but it doesn't hurt to have breaks in between. So I don't see it as one full day solid go, 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 go. I mean, it would have breaks in there and breakout sessions as well. The same thing with the 2.5 days. And I think it's important to understand, and everybody has the same perception of what reconciliation means. And I think it's about having a platform to promote listening. And it's important that people put the things on the table that need to be discussed and take the time to do it. So I certainly don't have a problem with the length of time. I think it's important. We've talked about having a C2C event for quite a while. And anything that helps that go smoother, in my opinion, is a good investment. So with that, I've got, Director Jules, followed by our CAO.
Sorry, no, my hand's not up. I'm not sure if it's maybe just a glitch on your side, maybe, but I don't have my hand up.
Okay, I'll blame it on Tom's computer because I don't have it on mine. Dave? Sorry,
Thank you,
Mr. Leach.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just want to, in case the committee isn't aware, Tina's done a masterful job organizing training for staff. And when I say staff, we have integrated the Comox Valley Regional District, all the munis within the SRD, city staff from Campbell River, Zabalas, Tassus, and we participated in a number of sessions. And they're really no different time-wise than anything else we've participated in training. So I wouldn't get caught up on something that says 2.5 days. This is typical training with breaks. And Tina will quickly realize the most challenging part of the job is in scheduling this. So don't get too caught up in the dates. She's clearly new and very optimistic in thinking she can cram this training into those dates, and she's going to quickly realize how challenging that is. So I think really the gist of the report is to get support to engage in the training, and then she has an undertaking of trying to gather all elected officials together. And that is, I'm going to make an assumption because we did it with staff, that includes council members from other municipalities and regional districts. That was really a great opportunity to bring everyone together.
Okay, super, thank you. Anything further on receipt? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed? Seeing and hearing none, motion carries. Item B,
I'll move B. Claire?
thank you.
Second, Director
Sec-
Colburn.
And seconded by Director Colburn. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, gonna call a question. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Correspondence, Comox First Nation Cultural and Heritage Policy. Receipt motion,
Move receipt. Claire?
thank you.
And
Second,
Davis.
second,
Thank you.
Director Colburn. Oh,
it's okay, just speak out. Okay. Yeah, so. Discussion? Okay, Director Abram.
Thank you. Okay, so we're on item I1, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and on receipt, there's one line in here. I have no problem receiving this or going along with it, but there is one line in here that is bothersome, and I think I need explanation. I was trying to get to it here. Sorry. Okay, it's sort of at the bottom of the first page, directed to Director Unger. Last paragraph. It's about, it starts with, after a comma, it says, it is to be understood that KFN has outstanding concerns about any potential project-related impacts on our cultural heritage. It should be noted that property boundaries under the Land Titles Act are irrelevant to Comox First Nation, and on to the next page, are irrelevant to the administration of the British Columbia Heritage Conservation Act. So what this says to me is, just without explanation, it says to me that the lines that are drawn on the map at this particular time by the Land Titles Act are irrelevant. They don't exist. And that would mean, I'm not sure if that is supposed to mean all of the lines that denote property ownership, or whether it's all provincial lands that have different lines for different TFLs, different TSAs, those kinds of things, or if it's so referring to private lands, because as you all have heard many, many times, that private lands are not on the table in treaty. So I'm just wondering what receipt of this letter does to the overall policy, provincial policy, of acknowledging that there are Land Titles Act lines in place at this time, because this says they're irrelevant. So can somebody please answer that for me?
Okay, I'll see who we can best do that. I will go to Mr. Yates first. He usually deals with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A motion to receive is merely an acknowledgement that this has come before the committee and has been accepted as correspondence. Doesn't commit the committee to any particular perspective or recommendation as to what, how to dispose of the correspondence, but simply to receive it.
Okay, thank you. I think you bring up a good point, Director Abram, and perhaps that's something that staff can follow up to get clarity from Comox First Nation.
I would appreciate that.
Okay, with that, CAO, is this something that we task you with and then Tina, or is it something we got Tina to do? You're muted, Dave.
Apologies for that. So Tina will likely be the person doing the majority of the work here. Tina is a member of the Comox First Nation and was on their council. So I think it's best left with Tina. We can get her to bring a report to a future committee meeting answering these questions.
Okay.
Thank
Is there
you.
anything further, Director Abram?
No, that's it. Just have that question.
Okay. Anyone else with questions? Don't see anyone. My only thought was this is a very comprehensive document and has the regional district implemented a lot of this when it comes to different archaeological or cultural and heritage sites?
Mr. Chair, I can't answer that. Typically, staff don't do much with correspondence unless given direction. So I haven't done a lot with this.
Okay, I thought, do we have a legislative requirement to consult?
But with what specifically are you meaning?
Well, if it goes into land use permissions and decisions that are being made, do we have a requirement to consult? And how do we deal with cultural and heritage sites? I know how we handle them in the city. We've run into a couple of one while putting a water line in down Hilchey and the other along the sewer line installation on the old Highway 19A. So I know there's a process, but I would just wondered if this was part of our process for staff, or is that, do we need to refer this to staff?
If you like, we can certainly prepare a report for the committee. Again, a little unprepared. This is just correspondence. We don't do too much, if any, work on correspondence unless the committee provides us direction. If there's a motion for the report, happy to do that.
Okay, I guess my question to you is would the expectation of Comox First Nation be that they're asking us to implement this? And then I have, sorry.
I'm not certain.
Okay, Director Moglove and then Abram.
Thanks. It says right in the correspondence that moving forward, KFN expects that all levels of municipal governments within KFN traditional territory, many of which who have implemented their own adoption of UNDRIP framework, directly engage with the reconciliation process by formally acknowledging KFN's cultural heritage policy. We expect that all relevant staff will plan their projects in accordance with the KFN CHP in collaboration with our shared goals. So they are in fact asking the relevant local government to do something. So I'm not sure how far the Comox First Nations territorial traditional territorials extend into the SRD and how this would affect the SRD. But in response to what Director or Chair mentioned, they do actually ask for something. So I do think it would be appropriate to refer this to staff to see what, if anything, SRD should be doing in relation to this, because if we just simply ignore it, I would presume we would get another response. Well, what about this? So I think this is an important issue. And as Director Cornfield said, you know, we do have a policy at the city, and we have run into this issue a couple of times, and it's actually delayed a couple of projects until certain permits are obtained, etc. So yeah, I think this is really important. Thanks for raising it,
Okay,
Jim and Charlie.
yeah, and then I will, we're on receipt right now, and I guess I would take a subsequent following. Director Abram, I'm still on receipt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that we already have a policy in place. We certainly do in the electoral area planning process, that we bring to the board a list of First Nations that need to be referred on all development projects that come before us. So we, I get board rubber stamp to send out and work with those First Nations on whatever the issue may be. Doesn't matter whether it's archaeological, whether it's water, sewer, whatever. So that's already there, and we do it religiously. But I think you know quite well, Mr. Chair, while you're looking for your duck, that the provincial policy is very clear that the duty to consult, that the words, the duty to consult lies with the province. So, it is absolutely their duty to consult, and it's our duty to work with the First Nation through whether it's a referral process or just collaboration or whatever. But just on that one phrase that you brought up, duty to consult, that we've had lawyers come and present to us at the regional district on this very, very specific phrase. The duty to consult lies with the province. So, I think that one's already been answered, and the other part is already happening. So I don't think this is really a big deal.
Thank you, Director Abram. Anything further on receipt? Just before calling the question, they have asked for something, and I think it deserves a response in one form or another. And so on receipt, is there any one in opposition? Seeing none, receipt carries. Subsequent motions?
Yes, I'll move that the correspondence be referred to staff for a possible response, and in particular related to the paragraph I read out earlier. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me this second, but it's
How about just to their request?
Thank you.
In the letter.
Yeah. And
Okay.
if I get a second, I'll speak to it.
Second, Davis.
Yeah.
Thank you, Director Davis.
Yeah, so I mean, I totally appreciate Director Abrams' comments, and he may be totally correct, but I really think I would like to hear from staff on this issue. I don't want the SRD to, have any minefields that we could have avoided. So if it turns out that, Director Abrams is totally correct, absolutely, that's great. But let's not just sort of, I think we just sort of need to cover our bases and make sure that we are in sync, I suppose is the word. Thanks.
Okay. Any other speakers? I don't see any, so on referral to staff, is there anyone in opposition? Seeing none, motion carries. On to I2, which is the historic agreement in Fraser Valley. For
Motion to
receipt.
receive.
Thank
Cut
you.
there.
Second.
Seconded. Thank you, Mr. Director Davis. Discussion? I don't see anybody's hands up, so the only question I would have is that, does this automatically go into our portal, First Nations
Yes,
portal?
it does.
Thank you. Okay, so it does go into our portal directly through staff, so. If there is no further or no discussion on receipt, is anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carries.
I'd like to move items 2, 3, and 4, and 5 for receipt.
Second.
Two's already done, so we're looking at 3, 4, and 5.
5 for receipt.
Second. Thank you, Jim.
Okay. Discussion? Seeing none? I don't think there's any. Can't see anybody's hands up, so. Nope. So on receipt, all in favor? Vote, or sorry, any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. No director's report, no new business, no addendum items, no closed session, and Brad's favorite in.
Move termination.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second that.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. See you at 12:30.
Thank you.
We are
Yeah,
terminated.
see everyone.